Kathleen Kennedy, the longtime president of Lucasfilm, is planning on stepping away at the end of the year. She has arguably the greatest filmography of any producer out there. So what are her best films? Let's dive in on another episode of Pop Culture Picks. Hey everyone, I'm John Lunsford, and this is something I think a lot of us have seen coming. Kathleen Kennedy is 71 now and has an incredible resume in the entertainment world, but lately, the general public has not been a fan of everything going on at Lucasfilm, of which she is in charge of. Star Wars in particular has had a lot of hate thrown in its direction with some of the most recent stuff they've done, specifically The Acolyte, which I didn't hate, but I didn't love, and then of course the end of the Skywalker saga with the sequel trilogy under Disney. Lucasfilm also oversees Indiana Jones, and the Dial of Destiny didn't perform well, despite being one of the most expensive films ever made, losing Disney around $143 million. Now, I think Star Wars has still done some really good stuff under Disney. I really liked The Force Awakens, and I still thought The Last Jedi was all right. Disney is also responsible for some of the best stuff Star Wars has to offer, in my opinion, with all the stories they did between Episode 3 and 4, such as Rogue One and Andor. They've also done a good job with The Mandalorian as well. I think the biggest problem has been trying to figure out the next step for Star Wars on the big screen. The TV shows have been decent for the most part. Even if you didn't like The Acolyte, they've still produced some quality stuff. But there have been too many plans announced and then changed on the movie side. Films are supposedly still coming from James Mangold, Taika Waititi, while films from Wonder Woman director Patty Jenkins, more stuff from The Last Jedi director Rian Johnson, and even a trilogy from Game of Thrones creators David Benioff and D.B. Weiss were all canceled. So people aren't a fan of where Star Wars is right now, and who knows when we'll actually get another film in that universe. But I don't think that should diminish what was an incredible career for Kathleen Kennedy. Before Lucasfilm, she co-founded Amblin Entertainment with Steven Spielberg and her eventual husband, Frank Marshall, and then in the early 90s founded the Kennedy Marshall Company that went on to produce a lot of great films as well. When you look at her filmography as both a producer and executive producer, a lot of it with Spielberg and Lucasfilm, it's very much an impressive list of films. So what are my 5 favorite on the list? Let's go ahead and dive in. First up at number 5, I'm going to include The Force Awakens. I know this is an unpopular opinion, but I really did like Episode 7. I feel like it was made well by J.J. Abrams, and it got the sequel trilogy off to a good start. I've always said my biggest problem, and this does fall back on Kennedy, was that they hired different directors to come in and tell their vision for each of the 3 movies when it needed to be more cohesive. I don't even think Rian Johnson did a bad job, but I feel like he needed to tell his story in a different place within the universe and not try to follow J.J. Abrams' story. Then for Episode 9, J.J. Abrams had to come back after Colin Trevorrow and make something out of nothing, and it ended up being a disaster. But I am a huge J.J. Abrams fan, which is also part of this. I have loved a lot of his work, and he saved franchises before. He revitalized Star Trek and did a good job there. He completely saved Mission Impossible with Mission Impossible 3 and then continued to produce some of the later films after that. I love Cloverfield, and I love what he's done with that, with Cloverfield, 10 Cloverfield Lane, the Cloverfield Paradox, not so much, but I think there's still some good stuff to be done there. Plus, Alias was great on TV, Lost was great, and he even directed an episode of The Office. So I stand by J.J. Abrams being a good choice for Star Wars overall, and I stand by The Force Awakens being a quality movie. In fact, the highest grossing movie of all time at the domestic box office. So everything about that movie specifically worked. I know it all fell apart from there, and that does fall on Kennedy, but J.J. Abrams specifically was not the wrong choice for her to make, I think. Number 4 on the list, Kennedy actually has a few production credits with M. Night Shyamalan, including The Sixth Sense from 1999. That one and Signs are seen as 2 of his best films. Personally, my favorite is Unbreakable, but The Sixth Sense is probably the favorite to a lot of people. It obviously has one of the best twists of all time, and her husband were integral in making that happen. Believe it or not, Disney actually owned the rights at first. Then president of production David Vogel bought the rights for Disney without corporate approval, and then he was fired, and they sold it. And so obviously it ended up with Kathleen Kennedy. Could have been a big one for Disney. Number 3 on the list, 1993's Jurassic Park. She also did The Lost World and Jurassic Park 3, but we'll leave those off. Jurassic Park was obviously a Spielberg film, but Kennedy had already left Amblin by this point to start her own production company. But Spielberg thought enough of her to bring her back into the fold for this one, and she handled all the creative aspects of the project and handled the day-to-day post-production as Spielberg left to go do Schindler's List. Jurassic Park is still seen as one of the best films of all time, and Kennedy was instrumental in making that happen. Number 2 on the list, let's go back to 1985 with Back to the Future. I'm going to kind of just include all of them here, but I'm mostly talking about 1 and 2 for me personally. I actually like 2 better than 1, but I'm including the whole trilogy. Back to the Future is kind of everything when it comes to time travel and movies. It's one we always go back to as the go-to when it comes to time travel forward, backwards, and establishing so many aspects of pop culture that we still pull from today. And Amblin was very instrumental in making this movie happen because the movie was initially pitched to Frank Price, who was the president at the time of Columbia Pictures. Price opted not to greenlight it because while he liked it, he didn't think it would appeal to anyone else. The script was rejected around 40 times by major studios, including Disney, who didn't like the fact that Marty and his mom had a thing going on that was too risque. But after Romancing the Stone, Robert Zemeckis had built up enough clout, but had a grudge against the studio. So Amblin Entertainment stepped in with Spielberg, Kathleen Kennedy, and Frank Marshall and helped produce the movie. Spielberg hated Frank Price because he had turned down E.T., so Amblin Entertainment stepped in and made it happen. Number 1 on the list, let's go to 1982, where the logo for Amblin Entertainment comes from, and that is E.T. the Extraterrestrial. Anytime Spielberg, Kennedy, or Amblin are involved in a list, E.T. is going to be at the top for me. If you saw my Letterboxd favorite 4 movies, E.T. was at the top there too. Kennedy was a producer over this film, and it was actually her first ever producer credit. She started off with a good one. She helped hire the team of people who created the look of E.T., and the puppet for E.T. is still, I think, one of the best ever in film. The movie was nominated for 9 Oscars, giving Kennedy the first of her 8 nominations. The movie grossed almost $800 million on only a $10 million budget. To come full circle, at the time, it surpassed Star Wars to become the highest grossing film of all time until Jurassic Park, another Spielberg-Kennedy creation, passed it in 1993. E.T. was just the beginning of an incredibly successful career for Kathleen Kennedy, and one that may only be remembered by some people as ruining Star Wars, but she should be remembered for all the incredible work she did, including some good stuff with Star Wars as well. Some honorable mentions of the films she did that I liked. Rogue One, you have to give her credit for that, and I feel like a lot of people have that near the top of their lists in overall Star Wars movies. That was a Disney one that she did. She produced Gremlins. She produced The Goonies. I mentioned Signs as another honorable mention there from M. Night Shyamalan. She was involved as either an associate producer, lead producer, or executive producer on all of the Indiana Jones films. So she was on Raiders of the Lost Ark. She was on Temple of Doom. And yes, she was on some of the latter ones that have kind of flopped. She also produced Twister from 1996, the original Twister. I really like AI, artificial intelligence. I know a lot of people don't, but I like that one from Spielberg, which she helped with. She produced Seabiscuit from 2003, a good sports movie about horse racing with Tobey Maguire. And she produced The Curious Case of Benjamin Button with Brad Pitt. She's only 3rd behind Kevin Feige and Steven Spielberg in domestic box office receipts with over $7.7 billion. Of course, her and Spielberg share a good chunk of that, so Spielberg's only a little bit ahead of her. I think Spielberg's the greatest director of all time, but a lot of his best work has had Kennedy right there next to him, helping to make it happen. They were an incredible team, and she did a ton of great work throughout her career. She's the epitome of the term first ballot Hall of Famer, if there is such a thing for producers, and the film industry will forever be known as what it is thanks to people like Kathleen Kennedy. So what are your favorite films from Kathleen Kennedy? Let me know in the comments. Make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more pop culture picks, movie reviews, awards buzz, and more.